This episode of the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast is sponsored by Prolific Banking, digital client engagement solutions for financial institutions. Automate treasury onboarding, streamline compliance, and deliver seamless data exchange with Prolific Banking. See prolificbanking.com.
Welcome to the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast, your go-to source for insightful interviews and dynamic panel discussions in the worlds of treasury, banking, payments, fintech, and much more. Here now is your host, the Treasury Whisperer, Seth Marlowe.
Hello, Whisperees. Joining me today in the Whisperer studio is Scott Graf. Scott is the president and founder of Prolific Banking Incorporated, the modern platform-independent commercial banking layer built for financial institutions operating at scale. He founded Prolific Banking in 2020 with a clear thesis that commercial banks shouldn't have to rip and replace their core infrastructure to modernize treasury and payments operations. They simply need a smarter layer on top. A recognized expert in financial systems architecture, Scott brings deep technical proficiency in security, full-stack development, and enterprise operations. His career spans successful technology ventures, supporting institutions ranging from regional banks to global financial organizations, with a consistent focus on aligning emerging technologies to real-world banking challenges. Scott is based in Atlanta, Georgia. Scott, welcome to the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is a wonderful opportunity. I really appreciate it.
We've been talking about this for some time, so I'm glad we're able to make this happen. I think you've had, as most every one of my guests has had, an interesting career journey, and very few people kind of got out of school and said, I'm going to go into banking, or well, maybe people wanted to go into banking, but they didn't necessarily say they wanted to get into payments or the technology side or fintech. And it's always interesting hearing people's origin stories. So take us through a little bit your journey into commercial banking technology and what ultimately led you to found Prolific Banking back in 2020.
Sure. So I am from the technology side. That's where my base is. I went to a college out in the Bay Area, and this big revolution was happening, this thing called the internet and, Java as a language. In school, we had an opportunity. You could either go the C++ kind of old school route. It was very different back then. Mm-hmm. Or you could do this new, Java thing, and all the C++ developers thought we were idiots for doing the Java thing.
Of course they did.
Yeah. So
there was a bro mentality even back then.
So well, and they were driving all the nice cars, and I had a bicycle. But so I really embraced the technology of the internet. And one of my first jobs out of school is I worked for the government. I was civilian, but I worked for the government, and we did a case accessioning. This is in healthcare, where we were able to transmit images across the internet securely, so that physicians in Washington, D.C. could help diagnose, either grafts or images and all sorts of other fun things to remote places. Just really, really fun and innovative things that we were doing. And of course, because we were with the government, we had this huge budget and we could buy whatever computers we wanted. I was in Washington, D.C., and I got a call from a friend who introduced me to Dan Myers. And Dan Myers was running Magnet Communications. They were talking about this banking thing, and I said, "Oh, well, that sounds fun. That sounds great." Because they were bringing banking to the internet. Because I remember when running around SunTrust, you really couldn't say the word internet because we were never putting cash management on the internet. It just no. Started working at Magnet Communications and building out the iBank platform. That was great. Loved doing that. And I kind of fell in love with banking and treasury and really the business processes behind it, moving money and being able to really solve some complicated, complex issues. It was right up my alley because I like to build things. Mm-hmm. And that was really how I got introduced into all of it. And For those of you that don't know, Dan Myers is he's a huge individual as it relates to ton of experience in the banking industry. He's wrote several cash management systems in his lifetime as well. We became fast friends and we grew together into a point where we started online banking solutions together. That was in 2001. And that system that we developed back then in 2017 was sold to Fiserv. And most of the folks that do know the platform, it's called Commercial Center now. I did work at Fiserv for a little bit, about 3 years.
Okay.
Part of the deal, and actually enjoyed working at Fiserv. We were really solving a lot of problems, kind of getting more and more into the upmarket space. And then some things changed. There were acquisitions and things changed. That's how it is.
Sure.
And I really didn't feel that things were going in the direction that I felt they should be going. And that's when I left Fiserv and started Prolific Banking. There were a lot of gaps and a lot of opportunity in the market. And that's kind of a very shortened version of how I got to where I was to where I am now.
Okay. Well, let's hone in on those gaps. What was missing that you saw as an opportunity to pounce on?
So iBank was a cash management system, as well as the Commercial Center. We called it Messenger Financial Center, but I'll call it Commercial Center because that's what it's known as today. And they do the core lifting. You've got your payments, you've got your information reporting, great platforms. But, where's the onboarding part? How does a customer get from nothing all the way, to being, technical terms, splatted across the 7 different, treasury systems that are sitting at the bank? It's complicated. And I think a lot of times when folks say the word onboarding, unless you're a treasurer, right? It gives you the notion of, I'm going to open an account and I'm going to turn on online access. And there's so much more to it than that. All of the risk reviews and, how do I go ahead and set those limits up? And as I said, there's an orchestration that is done with several different people at a financial institution to implement one customer, and somebody goes on vacation. The salespeople are writing things in the margins on the form. And so really, none of that was streamlined. I did work with Sovereign Bank prior to being Santander Bank up in Boston. Len Goodman, he had a great concept, which was to automate onboarding. And so we did that as a custom project with them, and it was very successful. Our problem as online banking solutions is we were building a cash management platform, and we had this one onboarding engine that was just very, very specific to Sovereign Bank. And there really wasn't a whole lot of time to pull that back in. But it always stuck in my head of like, wow, that was really cool. It would be great to put something like that on the front end that really connected the sales process into the implementation process, and then, of course, supporting and operating. So that was the first thing that we tackled. The other things, and there's still a lot of gaps in the market. Some, simple things such as file transmissions, moving files from the customer to the financial institution, moving files from the financial institution back to the customer. And a lot of that's like, well, that's SFTP or FTP, with the security stuff around it. And, taking some of those older solutions, if you will, and providing new technology onto it is just what I love to do. And as an example, we have, and this is not plugging anything, but, we have the ability to do what's called cloud transfer. And instead of all the complexities around SFTP, we're able to, if a customer, because more and more customers are in the cloud, if they're on AWS or Google Cloud Platform or Azure, Microsoft, lots of folks there, we can actually just like a shared folder, it's not exactly that. We can just go pluck those files up just with simple credentials. Likewise, they can be moving things across. And so all of that SFTP complexity just goes poof. And it's really, really easy to have these two systems in sync from a batch process. And of course, the onboarding piece just continues to extend because the more that you're doing these things, the more that you have to onboard all those complex services.
So was there ever a specific implementation that you had your hands involved with where you say, God, this is such a disaster. There's got to be such a better way. And I know what it is.
Yes. And that's with conversions. I have to say the worst.
The dreaded C word.
Oh my gosh. I've been in a few of those. I'm missing a leg, I've got scars on my arms, but, and I have to tell you, the folks, this is a little bit of a plug, but the folks at Webster Bank,
good friends of mine today.
Yes. Mike LaCava and David Steyer and Dominic and Eddie, they were looking at our onboarding application and they kind of started looking at me funny because we were doing a Zoom call and I thought I had something on my head. And they said, could we use this to do conversions? And I'd love to take credit for it. I'd love to say, oh, yes, I thought about that. No problem. They did. They recognized that. And so Skyanna, who wicked smart and has been doing implementations and conversions, she really, really knows what she's doing. She just jumped right in and said, yes, we absolutely could do that. And we got to work right away. And it was the smoothest conversion that I'd ever been a part of. But not just taking my word for it, the bank actually won an award for how smooth that conversion process actually went. And so that's what I would say. The worst implementation that I've done. I won't name names, but it was during a conversion process, and that gap just appeared to us, and that's where we, applying what we have and the technology that we have to a problem that existed that we didn't really even know about, which I think is having bank partners instead of bank customers, where they talk to you all the time and there's this free flow of information back and forth to where they can bring something up of, hey, we've got this one thing that's going on. And for our team to go, hey, you know what? We actually may have a solution for you there. Likewise, us bringing up, because we constantly do that, hey, we have this new technology that's doing this, that's doing that. We like to try before you buy, If you guys want to take it on, maybe get a beta customer or something like that on it, go for it, kick the tires, see if it works out. If it doesn't, that's fine, no harm, no foul. And I think that's where a lot of my success has been, in that vein, where you're really working together as a partner versus a, customer vendor type situation.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That was actually amongst the many potential questions I had for our conversation. What really makes a stellar partnership between a bank and a fintech provider?
Yeah. The first thing that I would say is transparency, and not just transparency from the standpoint of, we're going to tell you when we're going to release stuff or any of that. And that gets into compliance. You have to do those things. But true transparency, I like to explain what the systems are doing. So, if there's a module or a system that's going to solve a problem, that's great. What I like to do, because when we engage a customer, we're not just engaging the product team and we're not just engaging the sales team. We're also engaging the technology team and the security team, and being able to really articulate to each of those groups how it all works. What are the internals, and really, for lack of a better term, open it all up so that they can look at it. And we're smart, but we're not the smartest people in the world. We miss things. And there are some concepts that some of our bank partners will come in and say, oh, well, we need to be able to do this. Or, hey, that's really cool. Could that feed this system over there? And I think what that does is, by being that transparent, it brings all of those groups into a level of domain knowledge about your system so that they're thinking in, how that system operates and works. And they can start problem solving and doing some troubleshooting on their own, and also be able to start, conveying some of those concepts. Hey, Skyanna or Taylor, it'd be really cool if the system did this. We like what it does, but if it did this, that would even be cooler. And then, dangerously, now I'm going to get myself in trouble, but, we never let contracts get in the way of business. Being flexible, we understand that financial institutions, especially the upmarket folks that we work with, it's not just one person that takes a look at a contract and goes, yeah, that's great. Sign it up, invoice, let's go. There are so many things that our bank partners are having to deal with on their own, getting it through compliance and legal and all of those other things. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking and they still have this problem to solve. And so not shutting that down, working with your customer, working with your partner from our side, and engaging before the contract happens to be signed and, engaging even if there is an existing relationship on a statement of work, starting that work so things can really become apparent within the bank. And it's easier for the product teams at the bank to actually execute because they have those details and work is actually being started.
Yeah, there's a lot of trust there that has to exist between the two partners to make that happen.
Yes. I have the pleasure and benefit of, I know a lot of folks and they know who I am. And I'm an upstanding guy, but they're also upstanding people. And, when somebody's got to trust somebody and I just happen to be in a position where I'm going to go ahead and trust my partner. And I've really never been failed before with that mentality. And if I do, I'd rather keep that glass half full, way about me and way that I engage and be disappointed maybe once out of 1,000 times.
Well, more power to you because I think in the age of all the litigation that goes on, too often these things end up being a battle in the courtroom and nobody needs that. Nobody wants that.
Exactly. And that's frankly not how I make my money. I make my money by providing solutions, not litigating things in court, as you mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah. So how do fintechs and their founders continue to underestimate things about the banks and how the banks operate? Sounds like you figured it out.
Yeah. I've been doing this a real long time and I've been exposed to a lot. I've been exposed to large banks, huge banks, and working there on site and understanding how all of this stuff works. And I think folks that don't quite understand, it's not just understanding Treasury. It's the bank operating model, right? It's that whole thing. And Treasury is super fun. I'm such a geek, sorry, but I have fun with Treasury because the problems are complex. It's not a simple, just do this and just do that and life is groovy. I'm a glutton for punishment. I love to wait a minute, but if this happens, that has to happen. But it's really understanding the entire bank model. How much can you really charge for a specific service? Because my goal is to make the bank money. If the bank is making money, don't worry about it. We'll get ours because all of our partners take really good care of us. But that's truly the mission because we're here to support our partners so that they can make money doing their things and they've got lots of competition going. So being able to understand those dynamics within the bank, sometimes politics, knowing the Treasury operations cold so you can bring those things into any type of conversation, as well as being adept at implementing the technology, not to mention all of the compliance things that you have to do.
That's right.
I think it's a lot. And if I were just jumping into it cold myself, I wouldn't be able to do it. I was kind of nurtured and mentored. I had my mentors along as I grew. So I was able to have the time and experience those things. And I think that's where sometimes a lot of the fintechs, because they don't have that level of mentorship, not having someone there that understands how it all works and what's really needed in order to support a larger financial institution, I think that's where things probably fall over.
No, it makes a lot of sense. In the past year and a half, I've encountered a lot of founders who are, they've got new ventures and they're still figuring it out. And as a result, they don't know about the compliance pieces. They get it as they go. And so there's not this complete understanding of what really goes on behind the scenes at a financial institution. And, sometimes it works and they move on to the next happy client and other times not so much.
Well, and there's a lot at stake. And for us, it's personal. When when a group of people select our solution or select us as a partner to do something, they're putting some stuff on the line. They're putting their reputation on the line as well throughout the bank. And so being able to deliver, not just for ourselves and not just for the bank, but for that group that's actually going to put that trust and faith in you is a big deal. And you got to hit all those parts, because if you don't, folks can actually lose a little bit of credibility within the bank.
Sure. So, Scott, let's talk a little bit about Prolific's, I'll call it your signature product, OnRamp.
Yes.
And I guess the first question, without really talking about the product per se, but why is onboarding just seemingly such a broken process in so many organizations? What is it that's so hard?
Yeah, it is there are many systems and there are many people and there are many processes. And so just taking one of those elements is hard. Taking all three, throwing them all into a bag, mixing it together, and then trying to come up with something is incredibly difficult. And one of the reasons we've developed our system this way, because I said those three, mix them in a bag. Why did I say mix them in the bag? Because there are so many variations. No two banks do it the same. There are different systems that need to happen, different workflows based on who the customer is. You could have a small business, you could have a large enterprise, and everything in between. And it gets complex. It's also one of the other things about a bank operating model. It's constantly changing. Not just new technology, but new vendors. Okay, we're done with this. Now we're going to move this in. We have this new pressure over here. Simple things like, hey, loans are the way to go right now. And the market changes. Whoops, deposits are the way to go right now. I mean,
that's right.
It switches. It's constantly moving, which again, I think is super fun. And so one of the ways that I think we differentiate ourselves and also solve that solution is our solution is not opinionated. So we don't have here's the solution. Your bank now needs to conform to how this works, kind of shoehorning something in. We come in and we analyze all of that complexity. And then our system is built around that internal complexity. Sometimes we ask questions about, well, okay, what happens when this happens? And, everybody in the room is, well, we don't know. People come, people go, people retire, all of these other types of things. And so,
Betsy used to do that. And
exactly.
Betsy's been gone. We don't know what Betsy knew.
we had Betsy's party, 2 years ago when she retired. Call Betsy. But the domain knowledge is moving around as well. So I would say a lot of moving parts. And then you got to throw in the teams, we talked about Betsy, but Fred's on a 2-week vacation. And so how does that one customer continue to get onboarded when Fred's got the piece of paper that has all of the solutions on it, or maybe a PDF, or maybe even Excel spreadsheet? Although the salespeople do like to write things in the side. And I'm not bagging on salespeople, because I could also, the salespeople would be like, well, if you had a form element there, I didn't have to write it on the side. So all of that. And truly, too, as a part of onboarding is you have that, those different personas within the bank. Salespeople want to do a certain thing. They're trying to sell things and they're trying to implement things and take care of the customer. Then you've got your operations people on the back end that, they're a little more constrained with the compliance and everything else. And they have to do things in a certain order. And then there's, of course, the communication even within the bank. Sometimes some folks are siloed and they don't communicate. And so all of that, again, that's why I say you throw those things in a bag and you shake them up and here you go. One other thing that I will mention, and this is super critical to our success, is that we have people on staff. We have I don't like to say ex-bankers because that means, it kind of means, ex-banker. People who used to work at banks that have done the implementations, that have done all of this setup by hand. They know what they're doing. They've been through it before. And Skyana and Brittany is another product manager. David Steyer's another, product manager on the side. These are people that have walked a mile in those shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So they really, really understand. And when they hear things within a group at the bank, they can read between the lines. And so we've mixed that with some really stellar technology people. And that's how that all comes together in order to solve that or this onboarding incredibly complex process.
I'll just throw this out at you, Scott. Are bank executives and maybe even corporate treasurers sort of obsessed with the concept of a FedEx or pizza tracker for these kinds of things? I mean, is that a necessity, or is that something that's just a little overhyped?
It's a dangerous question.
Careful how you answer.
I know. Yeah. I really don't think it's overhyped because it's a function of managing the business. And it's incredibly important to have that level of reporting. We go in and start talking with some of these financial institutions. And the first thing we ask is, how long does it take you to onboard a customer? And you got some folks that say, oh, it takes 24 hours. And then you got some folks that say, I don't know. And then other folks that say, oh, no, it takes 3 months. Okay, how did we get from 24 hours to 3 months to I don't know? One of the things that we've done also because of wanting just that tracker is we have SLAs along all of the different workflows and all of the different tasks and really getting a baseline metric of this is how long it takes. And you have to marry that with how many services did this particular company sign up for? Well, there's all sorts of other types of processes, but really distilling that down into, okay, we have these certain groups of organizations because, we're humans. We like to patterns. So I've got this group, I've got this group, and I've got this group. Okay, now we're starting to get into product management, right? Where it takes me this long for this group, this long for this group, this long for this group. And I typically define that group by the number of services or the types of services that they're going to consume from my portfolio. So being able just to, for the product team and even the operations team to go, oh my gosh, Eureka, look at that. This is how long it's taking to do those things. And being able to report in a meaningful way up to senior management. And senior management cares. They care, but they want a chart because that's how they're trying to run their business and everything else. We've actually discovered at one financial institution, the SLA that was missed the most was the customer, because a document, everything at the bank was just like pop, 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 pop. And then the PDF agreement went out to the customer and crickets, and how does that follow up work? There's a scenario where, well, the reason it wasn't signed is because the customer went on vacation for 2 weeks. And then the customer comes back. Well, the onboarding person went on vacation for 2 weeks, and that's real, that's just real, which is why in our system, we have teams that look at these things across the board. So folks can go on vacation and someone is there to pick up where you left off. But that also comes a lot into play with how we do conversions, where we're able to tell senior management at any point in time how many people have converted and how many are still outstanding. And they can watch in real time as customers come in and convert just with the way how we do it. And so they have a real time tracking so they can know, all right, we're looking good, or no, we got a bunch of customers that just haven't even responded. Let's go get them. Let's do something different with that. So I hope I answered that craftily enough.
I think so. I don't think anybody will be shooting daggers at you.
Okay.
I've heard you talk about file intelligence, and this kind of gets us into the whole world. You talked a little bit about the FTPs, and more, there's API connectivity that's happening. There's all this connectivity that's happening directly between bank portals and ERP systems. What is this file intelligence mean for a treasury department that's looking to get plugged in with a new bank?
Yeah, I like to use the word engagement, client engagement, because, well, way back when client engagement was, face to face, or that new technology called TTY. where you could dial up your modem. And that's how you would interact.
I got to interrupt you here, Scott, for a second, but don't you miss the sound of a modem connecting?
The moose calls? Oh, yeah. Well, just not to digress too much. At OBS, one of our first engagements with SunTrust, Sprint was turning down all of their X25 lines, and they still had a significant amount of customers dialing up, Z-modeming the file, and SunTrust came to us and said, oh, they're turning down the X25 lines. What do we do? And so we went out and we got these T1 cards, and we put them in a pizza box and, plugged directly the lines in, and we emulated the TT. It was true TTY because we were using mGetty. I'm getting way too geeky. I'm sorry. But they would dial up, they would go into a serial port, and we would take from a modern Java application and we would stream the characters down into the TTY serial. This is the same system that was doing FTP. When I talk about customer engagement, it's really, nowadays it's more and more complex because I've got customers coming in through my web portal. I've got customers that need files. I've got customers that have an ERP system, such as Sage, NetSuite, Microsoft Dynamics, SAP, all the things that we connect to. And then I've got customers, and it doesn't have to be larger customers, that have a technical capability and they want APIs. They know what they're doing. They are either leveraging an SDK of one of their ERP systems and creating solutions within their accounting and treasury departments that could be an edge out over their competition. And they want to do something different, whether it's compliance, however that's rolling around for them. And so they're going to want to leverage straight up APIs. And on the API side of things, we now have a new customer. This isn't a treasurer that's logging into the bank system to check their balances or do work. And I do not mean to minimize what treasurers do by just saying what I said, because there's a lot. But now we've got developers that need to log in and look at a developer portal and consume the APIs and be able to, mess around with it in a test environment and then get certified so they can move their solution into a production environment. So we've got all of these channels and we've got new actors in the mix now. And I think banks are incredibly challenged to serve that up. Over time, we've kind of taken our bank product managers and turned them into testers. And, because they're testing solutions all day long. When we talk about engagement, I really think about engagement as just a method by which information is being moved from the client to the bank and the bank to the client. So there are channels, if you will. I can be engaging the customer and brokering that information over a straight up website, a bank portal. I can be doing that over FTP or file movement. I can be doing that directly within a native ERP connection, or I can be doing that directly within APIs. What's happening behind all of that is the intelligence layer. And I'll throw another thing out there with engagement. And those are the things that are coming up. And that's your real AI. And I'm not talking about a chat bot that's sitting on somebody's treasury management system.
Right.
I'm talking about true embedded AI that's, really, really serving things up to the customer how they want it. So the file intelligence piece really comes into play where I've got a common set of ways that I can engage with my client. Now what I need to do is I need to take the language that they're talking or what's actually in the data that's coming into the bank, make sure it's translated appropriately so that I can move that information to the appropriate backend system so that that system can consume it. Likewise, I need to grab that information, pull it back, transform it, map it into what the customer needs, and then provide it down that specific engagement channel that they've chosen. And then at the same time, I need to package those into services so that the bank can make, for lack of a better term, money on that engagement.
Right. That's a very interesting and I'll say different way of thinking about AI as a service in banking. And I haven't heard anything like that before. So bravo.
Folks ask us about AI a lot, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I tell folks is, we helped usher in the internet era into financial institutions where they weren't going to do it. We're doing the same with AI. We have a very measured and very comprehensive approach to how that is embedded within our system. The AI portion of things should be just as natural as interacting with your web portal. And I can't say too much. I'm hedging a little bit, or else those Skyanna and Taylor will smack me on the head. It's that new way of engaging with a computer system. And that's really what AI is, right? You've got that huge database and you've got a whole bunch of algorithms that are running and the models and everything else, and the humans engaging into it. More and more, like my kids are using AI instead of Google to interface with things. I haven't replaced TikTok, crying out loud, but still.
Why not?
Yes, I know.
Wow. So, do you think having lived through that internet era and the hype cycles that were there and comparing that to now and the hype cycles around AI, are we going to have learned the lessons from what went on with the internet, or because so much time has elapsed, are we bound to be repeating some of the mistakes of that last generation?
I'm an optimist.
Good for you.
Yes, it's in there. I do think some things are going to be repeated. I think there's less and less of us are still around that went through that transformation. When I say hype, AI is real and it's solid. There's some wonderful, wonderful use cases for it. But I do think, the venture capitalists and, all of the investors are really jumping on this. And so, right, it's AI everywhere. And a lot of the fintechs, if you're an entrepreneur and you've got a domain that you're an expert in and you want to create a software system and you don't have the money to self-fund, so you do need to go out and get any type of investment, more likely than not, those investors are going to go, that's great. What's your AI story? You've got to put AI into your solution. In my very humble opinion, AI, well, this is true. AI is just a technology. You've got to know your domain and the problem that you're trying to solve, and then have a deep understanding of AI. And then you go, aha, that's where the puzzle fits together. Right now you're saying, oh yeah, we've got AI there. There's a chat bot. You can type and ask it questions. That's it. And again, I don't mean that in a nasty way whatsoever, but it's that pressure of, okay, you've got to have this, you've got to have that, because that's what makes the numbers on the New York Stock Exchange do what they need to do. We have different pressures. My investors are my customers. And a lot of them are asking, and this is where I'm the optimist. A lot of my partners are asking the right questions. They're not just jumping in, I think they recognize what's going on. And then we're having some very deep discussions about, what does this mean? How should we be thinking about this? And where is this all going? And so we are sharing with them where we're going with it and how we believe AI is really going to evolve the entire Treasury platform.
Sure. So I want to throw something out at you, Scott. I've been talking to a few people. It's come up on a couple of podcasts. I think we're headed towards something that I'm describing as AI fatigue. And I think part of that, it's not that there's just so much of it out there and so much attention on it, but as these platforms all are being infused with some degree of AI, the end user, whether they're sitting in a corporate treasury or elsewhere, suddenly they've got AI in their treasury management system. They've got AI sitting in their ERP. There's AI sitting in their bank portal. They may have a corporate AI that's being rolled out by their company that maybe handles all sorts of financial applications. How's a treasury or a corporate professional supposed to manage all of this, where each of these AI platforms can range from being nothing more than an elegant chat bot to something that's the real deal AI, and trying to just manage on a day to day, and potentially reconcile the fact that the same question asked in some of these platforms is going to yield different responses and different numbers, where the numbers matter.
I like the word that you used, fatigue. I think that's spot on. And as with anything, things go quickly. All of this stuff gets pushed on to the treasurer. I think there's overload. I do think there's fatigue. I do, like you were mentioning, the models aren't shared between the systems. So there's no continuity between those different platforms. And, I saw this really funny cartoon, kind of funny, where somebody's asking AI, hey, look at this mushroom. Is this safe to eat? And AI says, yes, that's a something, what AI does. It gives you a whole paragraph of, I just wanted to know if it was safe to eat. And it gives you all this. And then the next frame, and again, it's a cartoon, person's lying with X's over his eyes. And AI's like, whoops, sorry, and how much of that, how strong is the model? AI is everywhere where, hey, AI can make mistakes. The decisioning needs to stick with the human. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. These platforms have to provide the treasurer with the information, and then the treasurer makes the decision. And so, when AI is actually presenting data that, because a human's going to look at it and go, hey, that's right or that's not right, that's where things need to be introduced slowly into the fold. And it needs to actually augment, if you will, information that's given to the treasurer so that the treasurer can go, okay, that looks great. I can go ahead and move on this. As long as that data is factual and we're not asking for an inference. And you can argue that, well, isn't that what AI is all about, creating those inferences? In a way, yes. But what we really need to do is we really need to provide the level of information quickly to a human so the human can do their job better. And I wouldn't say better, but faster. Because that information, instead of me having to gather it from 5 different locations, it can be presented to me visually in a way that I can understand. That's what's going on. I can see these trend lines that would have taken me several hours or even several days to put into an Excel spreadsheet and make that bar chart so that I can see what that looks like. And I'm way oversimplifying this.
Oh, sure.
But agreed. I think that that's going to be one of the cycles, and fatigue is a great word.
I think the other thing is, and certainly from a treasurer lens, there needs to be repeatability, so that if I've used this example, 2 smart guys named Scott and Seth go run some analysis and they come back with different results because I did mine yesterday and you ran yours today, and nothing's really changed, but yet the results are different. I think there's just going to need to be a whole lot of variance analysis that we're going to need to have these tools provide to us, as well as some sort of audit trailing. It was this yesterday for Seth, but it was this today for Scott. And well, Seth's not around to explain it. He may have analyzed it afterwards, but with the fatigue is going to be driven by a lot of reconciliation between differing answers of the analysis that comes out.
I agree wholeheartedly.
So to try to get us to kind of the wrap, this has been a fantastic conversation, Scott.
Oh, good.
What's your overall outlook for treasury and commercial banking technology over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think what my outlook is, what we're going to try to make happen.
Crystal ball time
is really putting the two pieces. There's my partner's customer, because I always think about them,
Sure.
Who's the eventual consumer of the service. They're moving at breakneck speed. They don't have all the compliance and all the regulation a regulated financial institution needs to have in place in order to run their operation. So as they have moved faster and accelerated things, that's put a lot of pressure on the financial institution to constantly put new rails in place, competing with how am I going to be delivering and engaging with my customer. That whole process will be smoothed out because there will be far more self-service. We've been talking about APIs for years, right? And APIs to me as a programmer is like, oh yeah, that's been around forever, right? And APIs and APIs, just that's all it is. But very much like when the internet started, now you do have AI and AI can write code and, not all the deep complex code, but if I, as somebody who's semi-technical at this commercial organization, can write something or, have Claude or whatever it is that you're using, write this module out of the ERP's SDK and rock and roll, here we go. Those APIs are going to become more and more important. Sure, there is the black box when I'm moving information in and out of an ERP. That's standard, right? That's also APIs, but that's standard communication. That is, Sage talks different than SAP, that talks different than NetSuite, but those are pretty standard. That's why we offer those as connectors, one piece. But it's the extra parts. And I do believe we're going to have a massive acceleration on the customer side to want to leverage those additional pieces. This is where a developer portal that a bank can serve up. So all of these APIs are available. The customer's developer can come in, they can see what's going on and do whatever it is that they need to do. The bank can support that development capability or functionality that they have and also certify them as they need to go. So there's going to be new operational things just based on the new actors and use cases. I do also feel that with automation, and that's some of the stuff that we've been doing with our onboarding, a lot of the automation pieces will make life easier, and it'll also make things more visible. I mentioned this earlier. Instead of your product managers being testers, your product managers can go not back, because they're doing it today, but they will have more time not having to care and feed for a system or a vendor.
True.
Really be able to look and be more forward-looking with what it is and maybe even break out and be a little more innovative versus just receiving what their largest vendor is attempting to feed them.
Yeah. And maybe allow them to actually get out and talk to their end customers.
Yes. That is one thing that we do. We do talk to our partners' customer. And I've spoken at some NACHA events where there's commercial customers in there. A lot of our partners have actually brought me in to speak to their customers. And it's really, hey, what is it that you guys are experiencing and what are your needs? What do you think your needs are going to be? Where are you guys going? And I like to feed that information back to our partners, but you are spot on. The bank product people should have the time to be able to do that too.
Yeah. They've often been the last one in line to get out to conferences and to get out to customer visits to actually talk with customers. So that's a good thing on the horizon.
Yes.
Scott Graf, everybody. Thank you, Scott, for joining me here today in the Whisperer Studio. Great conversation.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you for having me, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Scott. So that is a wrap for us, Whisperees. If you want to get your message out to the Treasury, banking, payments, and fintech world, here's an idea. Sponsor an episode of the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast. For more information, email us at info@treasurywhisperer.com. Until next time on the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast, this is Seth Marlowe saying bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast with Seth Marlowe. The Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast is produced by the Treasury Whisperer Studio and Treasury Whisperer LLC. Copyright 2025. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account of this podcast without the express written consent of Treasury Whisperer LLC is strictly prohibited.
This episode of the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast was sponsored by Prolific Banking, digital client engagement solutions for financial institutions. automate treasury onboarding, streamline compliance, and deliver seamless data exchange with Prolific Banking. See prolificbanking.com for more information.